Okay, I think I'm live right now. Maybe caught mid-cough. All right, let me double check that everything is showing where it's supposed to show. I'll just be a moment. Yeah, it looks like I'm live. And I'm live over here too. All right. Hello. So, okay, where's that thing? All right. So it's Thursday afternoon. Hello. Welcome to spreadsheet time. In the last few tips, it felt like everything I would do would suddenly come down to a pivot table. And pivot tables really are one of the key parts of spreadsheets that I think change your total capacity to use your data. And it really makes your spreadsheet more powerful. And I thought I would take this moment to do an overview of how pivot tables work, how you build them, some of the key features, so that you can use them in all kinds of contexts. So it's time for a pivot table party, the best kind of party. So here is a pivot table. I'm not a pivot table. Here's a spreadsheet. And in fact, if you want to follow along at home or look at this later, you can get that by going to this link here, spreadsheet.farm/FSA034, and you'll get that information here. So let's look at what a pivot table does. So we're going to use a crop planning example. I put together a really simple crop plan where it has, what crop we're growing, what day we're planning on planting it in the field. So, beets on the 1st of May, carrots on the 1st of May, a bunch of stuff on the 1st of May. Then those same crops 2 weeks later, some more 2 weeks later, some more 2 weeks later, so forth. How many bed feet we're planting each of those weeks, what yield we're expecting to get, and what units the yield is measured in. So we're expecting to get 2 bunches of beet every 150 or every bed foot out of here. And then there's a formula of the expected harvested forecast. So, 2 bunches times 150, we're expecting to get 300 bunches out of here. And if we sell them for $350 a piece, we're expecting $1,000, a little bit more than $1,000 out of this crop. So here's, just a simple streamlined crop plan document. And one thing that's great to have is if you can get a calendar kind of like this one. This is what makes a crop plan really great, is when you can synthesize information. So here's the crops in the crop plan each week, and then how many we're planting each week. So this is a fantastic document, easy to understand. So on the 1st of May, we're going to plant 150 bed feet of beets, 300 bed feet of carrots, 100 bed feet of chard, 200 bed feet of kale, 150 bed feet of lettuce. And if you show this to your team, they're going to understand it way more than if you show them this. I mean, the same information is here. Now, one problem with creating a calendar like this, or, well, I guess pre-pivot table, involves either fancy formulas, not that fancy, but a little bit of formulas, or it involves copy pasting to get information in here, which is still good, but it's not going to be as powerful as if we have something that's more dynamic. And that's where we're going to use the pivot table as the first example, is to replicate this calendar. So here, I'm going to go back to the crop plan. I'm going to highlight the data that we see. And I'm going to go to data, and I'm going to click on pivot table, which is right here. And again, it says create pivot table. The range I just highlighted. I'm going to insert it into a new sheet, but I could put it in an existing sheet. So I'll insert that to the new sheet, create, and here it shows me this. Now, there's the word rows, columns, values. And actually, what I could do, let's just take this calendar right here, and I'm going to paste it right underneath here. And what I want to show is that these information, this is the rows. This information up here, this is the columns. And this information is the values. And that's what we're going to do with the pivot table is we're going to map what items we want to show up as rows, what items we want to show up as columns, and what items we want to show up as values. And we're going to do that on the right side. When I click on the pivot table, on the right side, the pivot table editor opens up and I can assign different items. And what I'm assigning is from the crop plan. So it's these top, the header of each column is what I can see in here. So if I go to row, I see crop, field date, bed feet, yield per bed feet. These are this information here. And when I'm going to choose something, it's going to show me the unique quantities that are in here. So if I go for rows and I add the crop, it shows me the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 crops that are unique in here. So beets, carrots, chard, kale, lettuce, everything else is a repeat. So that's what shows up here in the rows. Now for the columns, if I want it like this, I'm going to choose a date. So go to column, the field date shows up, and here I see all those dates showing up. And that's these dates here, each of the dates that's unique. The 1st of May, the 15th of May, the 29th of May, and so forth. So you see that right here. And then the values, and the values is what the pivot table is going to do math on. So they're going to add things together, or we'll see. So here, when we do values, we're going to add in the bed feet. So all the bed feet show up. So this is the information that for beets, 1st of May, 150. When we look here, we see beets, 1st of May, 150. And we see all the other information similarly put in here. And what's interesting about this is if I change this number to 300, it's going to change here also. So that's a very dynamic sheet that we have now that can show us that updates as we go along. So we have a dynamic calendar. Now, if I go back to here, just so to kind of reinforce what the values is, so right here, if I keep it at 150, so it's at 150. If I add 2 more rows, actually I'm going to add them, I'm going to copy this, I'm going to add them at the end, these 2 rows. So now the pivot table, actually, that's not going to work because, and the reason it's not going to work, we're seeing this right away, is the range in the pivot table here goes to H28. That's where I defined it to. And I've added these 2 rows after that range. So if I go in here and I extend this to H40 or H30, now I see 450 instead of 150. And what happened is, so I'm going to add a filter on this top row by clicking on the funnel. And now I have a filter and I want to just see the items that are beets. So these are the beet items. And I just want to see the items that are 1st of May. And so these are the 1st of May. So it added these 3 150s together to get 450. And that's what I see there. If I change one of these numbers to 600, so it should say 150, 150, 600 is 900. And that's what it is right there. So this is a pivot table. This is the basics of a pivot table. I can add a few more things. I can add more rows here. So something I could add the price. And so now that I have two items, all this funny stuff just appeared. So we see beet total, and that's because it's summarizing the total of all the beets at 350. And to get rid of that, I'm going to unclick Show Totals in the Pivot Editor. And now I still see a total on the bottom here because the crop is clicked. So it's summarizing all the total of the crops. If I unclick that, that'll disappear. Now, here, all the beets have the same price. Let's say I went in and I unfiltered the date, select all the dates, and I'm going to change half the prices for $4 and half for $3.50. So 2 different prices. Now, the beets here have been split onto 2 columns. There's the 350 beets, 750 of them. So we'll see if that's true. So if I add 350 beets down here, down here, is that right? So the $4 beets, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times 5 times 150 is 750. And then there's 1, 2, 3, so that's 450 plus 600, 1,050 of the 350 beats. Is that what I see? That's not what, oh, it's because they're on different dates, right? So it's just 150 on that 1st of May. So here it says beat, and then these two are beats. Now, I might want this information to be beat on both lines, and that's what in the pivot table editor, it says repeat row label. So now it says beats for both of them. If I don't click that, it just says it for the first time. So let's see what else we can do here. So I'm going to delete this calendar I put in. So there's a lot of stuff we can do here. Now, something else we can do is right now we have the columns. These dates are listed as columns, but what if we put them as rows? So let's put them at the beginning here before crop. So I've added it before crop. I'm going to unclick show totals. And now what we see is the date and what's being planted that date and what dollar we're going to sell it for, and then the bed feet. So you can see the beats here are on 2 lines. And here, again, we see each of those information. We can repeat the row labels so that we see all of that. So we can repeat the row labels also for the crop. So it's the same information that we're seeing a different way. Now I'm going to go back to what we had before. And over here, when we're looking at the, where is that? Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to do next, I had a list of things that I want to look at. So next up, what we want to look at is we can look. So you have the information here. You might be curious what makes up the 750. If you click on the values, it opens up another tab with the details. It says detail, beat 350, 220, it's the date. And so here is, I guess it's the information that we're working with, the beats for 350 at that specific date. This is the information that's in here. So there's 600 feet of beats at 350, 150, 150 beats at 350. And so this is the information that's being added up, which is what we see right down here. It's this information that's being added up. And so you can see the detail of it. So sometimes you might be wondering what that information's from, and it's hard to see it in your master sheet. If you double click on the item, it'll be there. Now, if you don't want to see that, and you might double click on it by accident and it's irritating to see it. So to undo it, in that case, you could just push Command or Control Z and it'll undo it, or you can use the undos in the corner and it just disappears. So we've undone that. Okay, so what are we going to look at next? Now, I'm going to go back to putting the date front, and I'm going to show something else that pivot tables are good at. So right here, or something you can do with pivot tables. So right here, we have different dates. Let's repeat them all so we can see all these dates. If I right-click on it, I can create, if I right-click on the date specifically, I can create a pivot date group. So here, there's a couple different options. I could choose to see the month. So now it shows me that these are days in month, and it consolidates it. So in here, this May is all the stuff, the May 1st and May 15th is all added up here. And the same for the others. Now I can also, I can unpivot the pivot items. I could also create a pivot date group around the quarter. So now the dates that were, I guess that's the May and June dates are here, and then the July dates are here. In this case, quarters aren't very interesting. If I was doing financials, if I was looking at sales records, the quarter dates might be very interesting in that case. So that's, anything else to point out here? No, so so I'm going to put it back to the month, or the actual date. So that's one piece of information here. Now, there's something, this is more recent in pivot tables, and we used it last week or maybe the week before when we were creating labels that joined all the items together. In the values is a calculated field. I'm going to add that in. So this is so in the previous, you had the choices of whatever was, so in bed feet, I can choose any of these formulas that are inside here. Now I can, with the calculated field, I can add another formula. And so let's say I want to see, let's say we didn't have this column H, and I wanted to see how much I was making from these crops. So I wanted to multiply the harvest forecast by the price to see how much I was expecting to make off of it. And so I would be multiplying these what are they? So it's the columns that you refer to when you're doing when you're creating the formula in your calculated field. And so I would be using a sum product. So equals sum product. So I'm multiplying, I'm adding up these items, or multiplying these items and adding them all up. And so, well, actually I could do that right here. I could do equals sum product. Actually, I shouldn't put the equals. All right, I'm just gonna write sum product. I'm gonna open a parentheses, and then I'm gonna take the harvest forecast, and I put those words in, comma, and then price, comma, and then close parentheses. And what this is going to mean, it's going to sum product, the harvest forecast, and the price together. And so I'm going to go back to here, and I'm writing equals, that's the sum product, harvest forecast, the price. I push enter, and it gives me an error message. That's because it says summarized by sum. Instead, I want it to be custom. And that should work. Oh, it does not work. I don't like that. The formula parse error, maybe I need to put quotation marks around the harvest forecast. Yeah, because it was more than one word, it didn't know that harvest forecast was together for the title. And so now this, I'm going to add a $sign. This has multiplied these things together. Now we can double check this, because in this case, we're going to add the total formula I did. So what I also did here is I made it a formula that multiplies these two together. And now with the pivot table, I'm going to add up all the ones for the same criteria. And so they show up the same way. So one is I created the formula to do it, and the other one happened on its own. And so you can, when you have a few columns, it's fine adding a column like this in and then pivoting that information out. But when you have a lot of information, sometimes it gets irritating to have these kind of work columns in. And so you could just, so in fact, we could actually delete this one, and we could have a sum product of bed feet times yield per bed feet, the price. And that would give us the same information. And I will quickly go through. No, I'm going to. I'll link to it in a moment. So this is the calculated field. So you can do other formulas that you might not have done in previous times, or you could do more things than just the choices that the pivot table gives you, which is pretty potent. Okay, where else do I want to see? So now that we have this information, we can. So the pivot table is great as a report to see information, but the pivot table is also now, it gives us data that we can reference in other spreadsheets. And so let's say we want to know the total of beets that we sold. We could write the total. We could do equals sum if, and then for beets, anything that is, so that from that column, anything that's in this word, we're looking for the total bed feet planted. We can do, and it shows it 1650. And so is that accurate? Let's put a filter on here. Well, I guess a filter like this. And we're going to skim down to see the word beets. And here it shows us these together. I add them up, and then in the little sum box in the corner, I'm going to look, it says 1650. That's the right answer, sort of. What's missing in this case is that it's not adding this beet up because this doesn't have the word beet. If I repeat the row labels, it now adds that to 1800. So I can use this information as data in other spreadsheets now. So sometimes you might have a lot of information, you consolidate it into a smaller set, and then you can use this as a data set that you're then using in other spreadsheets. Okay, only got a few more things I really want to clear. Two things. One is, so let's delete this. One is that this information is dynamic. It's not static. So it might be tempting. It might be tempting to use this as a planting checklist and to say, to put, we could insert a tick box here and just drag that down, and then we could have planted. And so we got in the field and we planted these 750 bed feet. We plant these 150, and we plant these 300. We plant these. So it's all May. We did everything that was here, and it's all got planted. And hooray, we're really thrilled. What's tricky with this is that this information can change. This is static. This is dynamic. And so right now, so I'm just going to highlight these words here is what's checked off, all the May 1st. But if I go to crop plan and I'm going to unfilter this, and I had changed one of the prices over here to $4 and $3.50. If I change the other one to $3.50, the beets is now just on one line instead of two lines. And what happens is this bottom one that's yellow, this used to be, so it used to be 2 lines for beets, then carrot, chard, kale, and lettuce. Now everything moved up one, but the check mark hasn't. And so this information is now no longer relevant. It's in line with the wrong thing. So that's why I said that this is dynamic information. As things change, this information might change. And therefore, any static notes that you have might no longer be good. And that is really important to be aware of, because you can really get caught with that. Yeah, same thing as maybe you wanted to have a little note that says, planted carrots too densely. And then if we wind up going back and putting that $4, now, oh, that did not change that. That did not. Why did that not? Oh, it's because it's carrots here are 4. So if I did 350, what was it that I had done before? I mean, I had deleted the row, didn't I? So if I put this back here, put this 4. Now the beets are on 2 lines, $3.50 and $4. And here it says planted carrots too densely for the wrong line. So again, I'm out of sync. So if you wanted to use this kind of information as a static list, what you would do is insert a new sheet. You could take this data, highlight all that May 1st stuff, copy it, go to the other sheet, and you could Control Paste Special. So that's a Shift Command V, or you could also right click and do Paste Special and paste the values only. So this is no longer equal to a pivot table. This is the actual data here. And so now you can add your check boxes right here and write whatever notes that you want as you go along, and this information won't update. Now, and this is like an actual snapshot of what you wanted to do and what you did. Of course, it doesn't update, so if you change something in the other sheet, this won't change. If you change a price in the other sheet, this won't change. So that's important. All right, we got a couple more things to look at. One is, so let's delete this. Let's get rid of some of these colors. There's some, I'm going to wrap these. Click on the 3 dots. I'm going to go to wrap so I can see all the words here. Some of these are a little bit ugly. So this says field date, day, month, because that's how this is how it was processed, a day in the month. If I unpivot that, it goes back to field date. If I repivot it, is this right? No, if I go here and I create the pivot date group and it says month, that says field date month, I might want it to just say month. So I can actually override the text that is at the top of here that's automatically generated. And so here where it says sum of bed feet, I just might want it to say bed feet. And then this calculated field 1, in this case, this would be total value, which is actually also what the other one is. Let's click on that. Total value. And this is actually verification, just verification. So you can override the headings, which is really great. Okay, so somebody asked, Geoffroy asked, So welcome in, Geoffroy. Nice to see you. So what do the check boxes do? So the check boxes, so in this case, they're just a visual thing. So I don't know when you joined in, but they're just a visual thing that you can click on to indicate that you've done something or not. And I was highlighting not to add them in here because this is dynamic, so it can change. Whereas if you make a static sheet, you can do it. Now the checkbox can also be used in other contexts, because if you do equals this, it's going to tell you true. And if you uncheck it, it's false. So it's either a 1 or 0 kind of context that's that's being used. So this could be used in other formulas where you want to know if it's planted. So you could write equals if this is equals true, then in that case, I don't know what you'd be saying. You could either display a text or I don't know, say planted. And if it's false, it's going to say to plant. And so as we uncheck things, things will change. Now that's a little bit beyond the context, but it does. But it's something that tick boxes can do. But I tend to just use them to indicate that a task is done or not. Okay, so we've just changed the titles here. Now the last thing I want to talk about is filters within your pivot tables. So in the pivot table editor at the bottom, there's an item that says filter, and we can use filters. We can open the filter and we can add a crop. And here we could say that we only want to see the beats. So everything that's not a beat will disappear. And so that information is no longer in the pivot table, which is pretty potent. There's another way this is very valuable is right now, when we define the range here is from, I think it's A1 all the way to H31. But maybe, and so that range, as we saw before, when you add new things on the bottom, so if I add another lettuce here, it doesn't wind up showing, let's say it's a new crop, this is rutabaga. It doesn't wind up showing in here that there's rutabaga, and not because it doesn't like rutabaga, but because this information is outside of the range. So instead, if I go to A1 and I go to H and I click here, so it automatically updates it to 1001, it's going to include rutabaga there, and it should, oh, it does not. Oh, so the reason is the filter right here. Let's get rid of this filter. And the rutabaga shows up here. Now, I'm going to duplicate this to just show us. I'm going to delete these two sheets, and I'm going to bring us back to where we were earlier with the dates at the top. And maybe I'll bring those back. I'll unpivot them so we see the dates. So we have our planting calendar. Let's just format those dates so we like them. Now there's this 0 that shows up right here, and there's nothing in the header. And that's because in our crop plan, we have included all these empty cells. And that can be an irritating thing to do. And so this is where a filter can also do something. So I'm going to add a filter with the crop. And you can do by values, but you can also filter by condition. And I'm going to filter for any value that's not empty. And okay, so all those zeros disappear because they were crops that were empty. Now that the crop has been filtered out, I can see, so that information is out. And there's one more thing of filtering that I want to show, is we can also insert something called a slicer. Where is that? Is that data? Yeah, slicer. And the slicer links up to a specific data set. So the data range that it's linked up to is the pivot table that we're on right now. Is that right? The data range, we could just highlight this pivot, or actually no, we're gonna do the crop plan. That's the data range that we're pivoting, or we're gonna slice, and as we adjust things in the slicer, so we'll see that in a moment, it's gonna adjust the pivot table. So the column we're going to choose is crop. So now it says crop here, it says all. If I click on this, it shows me all the crops. If I can clear it and click on beat, and this, let me just, okay. gonna have to drag this back up, drag this higher so that it's I can see the bottom. Click on it, and maybe I just open my window a bit more. I'll click on this so you can see the OK. I'm going to clear everything, just see beat, and do OK. And now only the beats show up. And if I wanted to also look at chart, I can click on that, and that shows up. So, so that's a slicer. I could also add another slicer that is also with the crop plan data. And that's this slicer here. I'm going to link to, so I'll do OK on the crop plan data. And I'm going to link to the field date. So now I can choose also a date that I'm doing. So clear everything, 5/15, for example, or let's say 6/12. I'm going to push tab to get down to the bottom. Enter. No, it's not doing that. Let's unzoom a little bit here. Click on this, clear everything, 6/12, and now I only see the 6/12. So I can play around with these different slicers and see different stuff. So it could be that I want to select everything to see everything that's there. I'll move the slicer over here. And this is the specific date that I want to, on a specific date, I want to plant different crops. So I can be choosing that out. And that, yeah, so it gives an easy way to filter things without going through the filter on the side. So this might be a good way for your staff to do it. And of course, you can also customize it and choose different colors. So your staff, so this might be an easier way for your staff to know how to go through so that they can see the specific information on a weekly basis to plant. So that's an extra tool. So that's the last, I think, thing related to pivot tables that I wanted to just go through. And so what we looked at was, so you start off with the data set, and we looked at I'll just go quick summary. To get a pivot table, you go on the data, click on pivot table, you choose where you want to put it, a new sheet or existing sheet, and then it shows you rows, columns, and values. The rows, you can click what you want to see, and the rows show up here, those items. You can add other items as your columns, and then you can add items as your values, and your values have math going up on them. Then you can use filters to look at different things. If you want to change your titles, you could say you can change the titles in the different columns, and that's basically pivot tables to you. And then you can also reference pivot tables and formulas. So those are the key parts of pivot tables. I have two more tips that recently we used pivot tables in. So I've put those in this in the sheet. So there's a couple weeks ago we looked at how to create a harvest list from a CSV file. So exporting a CSV file from an online store and then pivoting that to get a harvest list. That was a great example of pivot tables. And then another case, and this is where we got more tricky, is we were trying to merge a lot of different rows in an order into one cell. And we used the calculated field to get text in there. So that's a really interesting one. So if you look at the next level of pivot tables, this tip here would be it. So you can go back and look at that. If you're just joining, you can get this spreadsheet at spreadsheet.farm/FSA034. And as now time to sign off, if you have any spreadsheet questions or farming conundrums that you'd love to see a spreadsheet thrown at, send me a DM, email me, or you can fill out this form at spreadsheet.farm/questions. I'm always looking for new spreadsheet situations to crack. So I'd appreciate that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next Thursday at 2 p.m. for another farmer spreadsheet tip. And in the meantime, happy farming.